Hello there, I'm Lady Loy, as you probably know by now. You can catch me on Lovers Rock Radio every Friday, 7 till 9 for nostalgic vibes. You can catch me on Gold Standard Radio every Saturday, 7 till 9 for more new releases, up-tempo dance, all that kind of stuff. And and if you can't log in live, you can always catch me on Mixcloud, Lady Dash Loy. Now, today's food for the heart is about fear and intuition. Sometimes it's difficult to distinguish one from the other, and we let the wrong one drive our decisions. So, let's get on with it. So, as I said, good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on which part of the world you're listening in from. Today, I want to spend a few minutes talking about something that most of us experience, but often struggle to put into words, and that is distinguishing fear from intuition. I think one of the greatest needs behind this conversation is the need to feel safe while still remaining open. We all want to make good decisions. We all want to avoid unnecessary pain. We don't want to walk into situations that will wound us, but neither do we want fear to become the prison that stops us from living. The difficulty is that fear and intuition can sometimes feel remarkably similar. They can both tell you to stop. They can both make your stomach tighten. They can both make you hesitate, yet they're not the same voice. Fear usually shouts because it's trying to protect us from something that might happen. Intuition often speaks to you quietly because it's noticed something that we haven't fully understood yet. Fear is usually full of panic. Intuition is usually full of clarity, or senses or directs you towards clarity. Fear imagines endless disasters. Intuition simply says something isn't quite right here. Let me look at this a little bit more. I think many of us have become confused because we've lived through experiences that taught us to distrust ourselves. Maybe someone constantly told us we were overreacting. Maybe we ignored our instincts once and regretted it. Maybe fear kept us alive during a difficult season, so now it refuses to switch itself off, even though life has changed. When you've lived through enough disappointment or betrayal, your nervous system can begin treating every new opportunity as a possible threat. That isn't weakness, it's simply the heart trying to prevent another injury. But the needs underneath that are very human. We need reassurance. We need wisdom. We need peace. We need to know that we can trust ourselves again. And perhaps above all, we need to know that not every uncomfortable feeling is a warning, and not every calm feeling is permission. I've noticed something about myself years ago when fear was making my decisions. Everything became urgent. I had to fix everything immediately. Intuition never seemed to be in a hurry. It would wait. It didn't need to push me. It would simply stay there quietly, like a gentle tap on the shoulder saying, just take another look. Fear says run. Intuition says notice. There's a world of difference between those two voices. Have you ever picked up your phone because you were convinced someone had texted you only to discover absolutely nothing was there? But instead of putting the phone back down, you somehow end up checking the weather, reading the news, looking at tomorrow's appointments, going on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and then standing there wondering why you picked up the phone in the first place. Our minds are remarkable at convincing us that something urgent is happening when often nothing at all is. Emotionally, we've all been there. We assume there must be danger simply because our minds keep presenting us with possibilities. This is why learning to pause becomes so important. We don't have to obey every anxious thought simply because it knocked on the door, because that's what I do. Sometimes we just acknowledge it, let it sit for a while, and see whether it becomes clearer or simply disappears. I often think about Elijah in the Bible. After everything he had been through, he expected God to be in dramatic, the wind, the earthquake, and the fire. But instead, God came in what the scripture describes as a still small voice, i.e. intuition. I've always loved that because it reminds me that truth doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes the quietest voice carries the deepest knowledge. We live in a noisy world. Social media is noisy, news is noisy, opinions are noisy, even our own thoughts can become noisy. Learning to hear that quieter voice between all of that is becoming one of life's valuable skills. Another need behind food for the heart is the need to recover confidence without becoming reckless. There is a difference between trusting yourself and assuming you can never make a mistake. We all make mistakes. That's a part of being human. But if every mistake convinces us never to trust ourselves again, we become paralyzed. We start asking everyone else to make our decisions because we're frightened of getting it wrong. Yet other people haven't lived our lives. They don't carry our experiences, our values, or our calling. Advice is valuable, but eventually each of us has to decide which voice we will follow. I think intuition grows stronger the more honest we become with ourselves and the more we trust it. It doesn't flourish in denial. If we're constantly making excuses for people because we don't want to face reality, intuition becomes harder to hear. If we're constantly pretending we're fine when we're actually exhausted, intuition becomes buried underneath the performance. Honesty clears the path for wisdom and understanding. Most of us are looking for comfort, distractions, or certainty. We keep reopening the same questions, hoping certainty will suddenly appear. Should I stay? Should I leave? Should I trust him or her? Should I trust myself? Sometimes the answer doesn't become clearer because we've asked the question another 50 times. It becomes clearer because we've become quieter. Stillness often reveals what endless thinking cannot. I have discovered that fear tends to shrink our world. We stop trying new things. We stop meeting new people. We stop believing good things are possible. Intuition, on the other hand, may tell us not to walk through one particular door, but it doesn't tell us to lock every door forever. Fear generalizes. One person hurt me, therefore everyone will hurt me. Intuition stays specific. This situation doesn't feel healthy. That's a different conclusion. One closes life down, the other simply exercises clarity. Jesus often said, "Do not be afraid." I don't think he said that because fear didn't exist. He said it because fear makes a poor master. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is choosing not to let fear make every decision on our behalf. Sometimes courage means walking forward. Sometimes courage means walking away. Wisdom helps us know which is which, and perhaps that is another need our hearts carry. We long for discernment, not simply information, but discernment. We don't just want more facts, we want understanding. James wrote that if anyone lacks wisdom, they should ask God, who gives generously. I find that deeply comforting because wisdom isn't reserved for a select few. It is available to ordinary people living ordinary lives, trying to make the next right decision. Sometimes that wisdom comes through prayer, sometimes through experience, sometimes through trusted friends, sometimes through quiet reflection after we've stopped reacting. Distinguishing fear from intuition isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming more familiar with your feelings. It's noticing which voice leaves you exhausted and which voice leaves you peaceful, even when the decision is difficult. Fear often leaves us trapped in endless circles. Intuition points towards the truth. So if you've been struggling to know which voice you've been listening to, perhaps don't rush yourself today. Give yourself permission